I want to talk about functional testing, and I'll just get straight to it. We had a need and run problem project to make the QA far better. We had a previous solution that was a little bit cumbersome to use, and developers weren't really keen on touching it. So I looked for easy and cheap alternatives. So after a week of searching and testing stuff, I came up that WebDriver IO is a pretty good solution for us. It's Selenium bindings for Node.js. Now, just to get the point across from the start, this is where this will lead to. I'm running the test. The test is talking with the Chrome driver. That's the Selenium Hub that's talked with Chrome. And then the test does its thing, clicking buttons around and assert stuff. And sometimes, yes, it fails. And I have this lovely chart explaining how the communication goes. So our test talks with the Selenium Hub that, in this case, it's a Chrome driver because it's the cheapest one to set up. It can also talk with other browsers. We can set up also for native testing. And it provides a unified way for us to test with, to talk with different browsers or devices, because with Appium it can also do native stuff. And I want to show the code. So I used Mocha for setting up the tests. So this is just, if you're familiar with Mocha, the simplest case. We are going to open a URL, we get a title, we assert that the title is right, and we finish up our test. So I want to do not much to see, right? Yeah, I can slow it down a lot, but point here being that we want to get it done as fast as possible. So all it does is it opens the page, it gets the title, and goes out. So one thing I like stressing with tests is that they should be executed fast, so I get my feedback as soon as possible. I don't want to wait for ages. So this pause command, I don't really like them, because every time I have to use them, that means that I didn't properly set up the chain that where I listen for events or where I check if some precondition is met. So just to go forward, this one's also as simple as the first one, just the difference is we're getting the title here, we're getting the text from a selector. Question? Yeah?
Yeah, just a stupid question.
Yeah.
So this code is running in Node.js.
Yes.
And it talks to the Selenium thing, which is like a plugin or something?
Selenium Hub is a separate instance. That it implements the Selenium bindings. So at this moment, what I'm running here in order to show this stuff, I have an HTTP server providing the page. There's a Chrome driver. That's one of the implementations of Selenium Hub. And I use Mocha for running the tests.
Can you spend 2 words about what is Selenium and what is Mocha, just to clarify?
Yeah, well, I'm assuming too much here. So Mocha is really, really nice test driver. It enables us to write tests in the BDD style. So we say describe what's the name of the test, and then function within which we go with it should have a proper title. So when we run the test, we have this nice output. Hope it's visible, maybe a little bit better. So it just runs the test for us, and I like it because it's pretty easy to use. I keep all of the code within one file. I don't have to run between different languages, or yeah, nice and simple. So
Selenium is a program which starts a browser more or less, so you can execute this code instead of that.
Alright, so Selenium is not a JavaScript program.
No.
It's a separate program which you can run these.
Alright.
yeah, it talks to the browser, or it talks to the browser or to a native device on one side, and on the other side it has a REST API for getting data.
So you can run the tests on like an iPhone, an Android browser, a Chrome browser, or IE, you like that.
Alright.
Thanks. So that's regarding Mocha. And now I want to show you a few more tests. Oh, this is way too simple, so I'm just going to skip it. This one was also way too fast. So in this case, what happened is that we opened the page, we hit the increment button, the instant increment button, and then we got the text from the counter to see did it increment or not. The page in itself is very, very simple. So let's when I hit it once, it goes up, and it's so all the test did was hit the button, check the value. So in all our tests we want some interaction going on. And this one is very, very simplistic because the reaction is instantaneous. Most of the time we will have something where we do an action and then there's some communication on the back end and then something changes on the page. So for that one, sorry about that one. So now we click the delay the increment, which waits for 3 seconds before it increments the value, and then we checked it. So what I wanted to say here is that I used it in a slightly, for me, dirty way, because I just said pause. Hit the button, wait for 5 seconds, see what happened. It's very simple, but it's not the fastest way around because you're adding static waits, you don't know when will they expire. Will the action be done by the time I expect it to be done? So what I prefer is having, yeah?
Can you make a test to fail?
Oh, yeah, certainly. So let's expect some other value.
Remove the pause.
Yeah, that's also one case. There. It failed. 1 is not equal to 0. And now I'll try the same thing, but I'll just comment it out the pause. So again, failure because we checked the value way too fast.
What about the stack trace that we have in the failing test?
Yeah, the stack trace is usually terrible. Because it's JavaScript and it's callbacks with callbacks. So I usually rely on having a meaningful message here in the assert. I'm using just the regular, so value didn't increase. So now instead of my 0 not equal to 1, I have a more contextual message. And now I'll get to a more complicated case that doesn't wait for a predefined time, but instead it's pulling every 100 milliseconds to check, did it increase, did it increase, did it increase? And then we get a much faster response. And, well, the value didn't increase. Now it's getting very, very embarrassing. But
To run only that test.
that might be better. Or there was a glorious 3-second wait because that's hard coded in the page, and then an invisible change to 1, and then we're gone. So most of the time, when the application is a little bit bigger, I really like watching it. It's like Zen because you just let it go and it like clicks around and checks the values and clicks around, and I can just say it's compiling or something. So, but in this case, it grew a lot, the tests. I mean, compared to the previous where I just put pause 5 seconds, this one is more of a handful to maintain. So what I want to do is I want to reuse the code because everyone hates copy-paste. So I want to show you a really nice way that WebDriver I/O helps us save time. So this next example is exactly the same test, the one that you see here. Only thing is that I extracted all of the tests in a custom command. When working with WebDriver I/O, it supports this Fluent API so that you can just chain commands, and they're all waiting for the execution to be done, calling a callback, giving call for the next command, and so on and so on. So in this case, it's really nice that it also supports this method of adding your own custom commands. So I added a command called assert text. That is basically the same code that we have in the previous one, but now it's nice and reusable and much easier to see what it does, and then of course we maintain it in only one place. Point being, it's very easy to create domain-specific language or custom commands for your own project, so that if you have one person in a team that digs into this a little bit more, others can use it on this level. I mean, now I can pass this to some QA guy that doesn't have a lot of background in JavaScript, that doesn't really know what a callback is, but he knows that he's supposed to call assert text selector and the value that's expected, and he'll always know how to use it. So that makes stuff much simpler for the team as it grows. So, and just to demo this one too. Yeah, again, 3 seconds and we're gone. So,
In what context does that live? If you use the assert text, if you had another file running under Nokia and Selenium, would you be able to use that assert text in another file, so to speak?
no, I mean in this, as it's written here, of course not, because it's added to this client, so it doesn't go beyond. In a project that where we use it, we extracted all of the stuff outside, so there's a small library of commands that we use. We assert text, assert that the text contains something, assert all different kinds of stuff that we needed, so that it saves time and makes the tests as small as possible and as readable as possible.
Yeah, question. The hash delayed, that's jQuery syntax, isn't it? Or is it some other?
Oh no, that's just the selector.
Right.
Because
Yeah, okay,
this is the page that we're testing. So we're just talking to, this is the hitting the instant button, hitting the delayed button, and checking the counter. And as Stephanie said, can't remember when I used IDs, but they work perfectly for this case.
It's a demo.
CSS involved here.
Yeah. So, and I'm using vanilla.js, so. So the point being that it's also possible to execute our own code. We can send the JavaScript code to the browser to get executed. It gets even more involved, but because then you have to think that this function will just get serialized into text and sent to the browser. But it's all in all, it's quite simple to use. I mean, there is a bit of a warm-up time, but compared to other stuff that we had, it's much faster. And we had a really nice acceptance in the team that people started using it because it was easy and it was fast to get started. So,
Test, when you run the test, can you check multiple browsers at once? Or do you prefer to do like one at a time to test?
yeah, you can. The test can run on different Selenium, on different hubs. So you can set it up so that it tests Safari, tests Chrome. It can test on native devices stuff. So there's lots of stuff where it can be explored and what can be done. Also, it can. Our setup is usually that it runs on Chrome because we just wanted it cheap and fast. When the test case fails, it makes a screenshot. So we have it. So there's lots of possibilities, and it's quite cheap and easy to use. And the documentation for the project is very nice. So when you check the API, so for example, for a click, you have the short documentation, but you also immediately have the link to the source. So that will open that one specifically, so if you have any questions, it's really easy to get the feel what's going on in the background. And also it abstracts the protocol. So if we wanted to do something here like element ID text, because that's how in the backend how Selenium works. You have a web element ID of the JSON object that you want to find, and then you call Selenium commands. And if you again check the source, it usually points out to the place where it's defined, because the JSON wire protocol is like defined and not something that they made up. So you can actually have references to the commands and check out the whole of the inner workings of the backend. Like, so this protocol is what defines the Selenium Hub. How you talk to it: session, element, ID, text, and so on and so on. So.
Ways to fake functions or libraries in the target applications. Like we've seen the timeout example. Can we fake the timeout on the target application?
You can execute any code on the target one.
So we can use a code.
Yes, you can execute JavaScript code in the browser that executes within the DOM of the page. So you just have to be aware of the distinction of executing something within the DOM of the page or executing it on the Node.js within your own tests. So that's and I want to just show this a little bit more complex sample with a very popular Fireslide application, where tests hits the panic button, and we verify that in the other browser on the remote that the panic number increased.
Maybe not everybody knows what the application does.
Well, I mean, if you were here last time, I can't say much. But the point is, it's just a little bit more complex test where when I'm testing interaction in one browser tied up with the result that's going to happen in another session. So.
What would that test look like?
Well,
Show us the code for it.
it's terrible. It's terrible. I ran into a Chrome driver bug today when I was fixing that, and yeah, I'm not pretty. Like, it's callbacks with callbacks. I didn't have time to make it nice.
Are you ready for the code review?
Sorry, there was no guidelines for this one, so.
Can you also like connect this to say Grunt or Gulp or something so it runs tests when you?
Yeah, of course, of course. This is just Mocha, so you can. In my case, I was using Gulp in a pedestrian way. I was just using it to start a sub process with Mocha, because sometimes while I'm developing, the test just fails, and it dies. And if it dies, it just kills my. If it's running from Mocha started from Gulp, like directly within the same process, then it kills the whole process. So I was starting it as a sub process. So when it dies, I don't care. I'd make the change in my source code. It runs it again because it's a sub process. So it's all good as far as I'm concerned. So.
One more question. I'm not really a JavaScript guy, as you
Yeah.
might have noticed. Do you know if there is a way to run tests like this, but in Java instead?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we had a solution with that, and that's why we went with this one, because. But it shouldn't be impossible or particularly hard, because you have Selenium bindings for Java. So, I mean, in essence, as you can see here, it's just a REST API. So, I mean, you don't really want to use it directly, but there are Selenium bindings for most any language now. So, yeah.
Did the test load the assets as well as the page when you request it?
In assets, in what sense?
Like images, linked images, links.
No, it just opens a browser. The test opens a browser and tells it, go to this URL.
Okay.
It comes back to the test, and the test goes like, okay, now check give me the title.
But
Give-
do you have any way to run it headless?
Yes, you can run it to. You can also run it on Phantom.js.
So like, speaking of assets, if you wanted to test like that, for example, a specific asset or an image or something was loaded, then how would you wait for that? You know, would you have like an event or something that triggers when that asset
I would probably execute JavaScript code. You can there's handy functions like that call JavaScript code and asynchronously wait until it returns true. So you can write a JavaScript function that gets executed in the context of the browser, and it returns the image not loaded, not loaded, not loaded, loaded, and then it continues execution. You can also tell it to like get me the state or something, so you can assert that it is there or something.
Because I'm thinking like in case where you would maybe test a lazy loader or something.
Yeah. It's you can execute your own JavaScript within the browser if you want. You can also wait for elements. In this case, for this so-called Fireslide, sometimes we have to. I wanted to assert that there is a panic button in the attender mode. If people get bored, that's like the most important thing, right? So the problem was I do the get text. So to explain the flow here, when I do URL, it tells the browser to load it, and when it's loaded, it returns control, and then we continue with execution. So I didn't have this line here, so I was doing the next line, get text. But that text is synchronously populated on the page. So no go. So I had to insert this one where I wait for the existence of the element on the page.
Is that something you wrote yourself? Or is
No, that's covered within the WebDriver IO. That's something already provided. So in this case, I would extract loading the URL and waiting for the div to disappear, for the loading spinner to disappear, by just introducing one custom command that makes sure that it doesn't give me back control until it's loaded and the div is gone. And then I can just keep this test shorter. I can say like fire open, and maybe I even know the URL, and just keep it nice and tight so we don't repeat stuff all the time. And also I much prefer taking this code out and replacing it with a custom command to just assert text. Here's the selector, here's the text I want to see there. So it's much cleaner than handling the callback.